Dr. Anna Sitkoff.
What inspired you to get into the mental health field?
Yeah, so before becoming a naturopathic doctor, I was really interested in nutrition and specifically how nutrition impacted mental health. When I was in college studying nutrition, I worked for an organization called Windhorse, which focuses on mindfulness-based practices for mental health. And I taught a class for them called Food and Mood. And also around that time, my brother had an accident and has struggled with addiction and mental health since that time. And that has kind of furthered my interest in the field. And then, of course, it's like as you live more life, so many things happen that kind of drives interest. It's like I've had a number of family members and friends die, and that's gotten me more interested in kind of the grief aspects of mental health. And now, as a new mom, I have an 11-month-old. Have all this new firsthand experience with the postpartum period and this new understanding of what postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression looks like. And so now I have that kind of new interest in that. And then I would say too, being in practice as a naturopath, I end up seeing a lot of chronic illness. And so I see as my patients deal with a lot of mental health issues that come along with um, chronic health conditions, whether that be like chronic pain or um, chronic viral infections like long COVID or um, stage 4 cancer diagnoses. So I really think that, yeah, it's like mental health is so much of whole body health,
Yeah.
really. Yeah.
Yeah, what are some of your methods that you use to help people?
Yeah. So as a naturopathic doctor, I start with something called the therapeutic order for all of my patients. And the base of that is establishing foundations for optimal health. And so I really focus on the determinants of health to start out with. And so I look at, people's environment, their nutrition, their sleep, physical movement, their overall lifestyle. Really look at mental health through a whole body system lens and how, again, it's like mental health is not separate from the body.
Right.
It impacts physiology and physiology impacts mental health. And so it's so important to also look at hormone imbalance, neuroinflammation, nutrient deficiencies, blood sugar dysregulation, chronic stress. And so my methods are really like exploring those things, finding the underlying cause and treating that if possible. And usually before recommending medications, I explore all of those aspects. And then I really use a lot of herbal medicine and medicinal mushrooms in my practice. And I'm sure that most people hear medicinal mushrooms and mental health and immediately think psychedelic mushrooms, which I think they have a huge place and purpose in mental health, but that's not my focus. It's other kinds of mushrooms like reishi mushroom specifically, or lion's mane mushroom. People might be more familiar with those. Yeah, and so it's really, I'd say my methods are a full body approach.
How did you encounter medicinal mushrooms?
Yeah, so I always had an interest in psychedelic mushrooms. I think that's where a lot of people's mushroom interests begin. When I was like in high school, interested in psychedelic mushrooms. And then that kind of led to more of an, as I studied nutrition in college, I was interested in how mushrooms can be used as like a functional food or a medicinal food. And that was mostly around like shiitake mushrooms and maitake mushrooms. And then my dad was diagnosed with cancer, and part of his cancer treatment was a medicinal mushroom blend. And so that got me really interested in learning more about the use of medicinal mushrooms as uh, supplements and not just as food.
And you talked about how whole body care is important for mental health. So, what
Hmm.
are some of the benefits of using medicinal mushrooms with other forms of mental health care?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot there. So I think the first thing I'll say is like the importance of cortisol regulation. And um, it's really common for people who experience chronic stress or depression or PTSD to have some cortisol dysregulation. So, cortisol is our main stress hormone. And over time, if you're stressed constantly, your cortisol rhythm will be impacted. And mushroom, specifically reishi mushroom, can be really helpful for managing a healthy stress response and normalizing cortisol levels. Um, and so I think that with any kind of mental health treatment plan, like cortisol should always be looked at. And I usually use reishi as my main adaptogen or compound that can help to regulate the stress response there. And then another big aspect of mental health is adequate sleep, of course. So if you're not sleeping, it's almost impossible to emotionally regulate. And mushrooms can be really helpful for sleep, for insomnia, and reishi again can be a really helpful mushroom for sleep. And another big aspect of mental health is low motivation at times, especially if you're experiencing depression. And so, mushrooms like reishi mushroom and cordyceps can be really helpful to improve energy and endurance and like, overall motivation. Um, and then other kinds of therapies that I typically recommend to my patients, specifically for like PTSD, is some kind of limbic retraining. The limbic system is basically like your emotional nervous system, and certain limbic retraining therapies like EMDR can be helpful for people. And so using mushrooms like lion's mane, which can play a role in your neuroplasticity, can be helpful to use an adjunct with things like EMDR. And then lion's mane too has some research showing that it really helps with mood, especially in postmenopausal women. And so that's a common mushroom that I would use for people, this especially in the like postmenopausal period, maybe in combination with hormone replacement therapy, if that's a good option for somebody, because that can also be really helpful during that time for mental health.
Have you seen your clients' confidence level rise as they continue to work with you?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, I think that as you feel um, healthier and safer in the world, confidence is bound to rise. And I think that a lot of the treatment approaches that I use really help people to have a better quality of life overall and function better in their daily lives. I mean, can just I'd say like my go-to treatments are often quite simple. It's like if somebody's experiencing chronic anxiety, and I recommend that they eat more protein during the day and eat more regularly, don't skip meals, have at least 30 grams of protein at each meal, and then do yoga nidra or some kind of meditation at least once a day. It's like those two things I've seen totally change people's lives and um, improve people's confidence of just like being able to be out in the world and not have an anxiety attack. So yeah, I'd say that people's confidence definitely increases.
I know for me, I'm trying to do a good job of working on my mental health, but I don't do such a good job of working on my physical health. How important is it for people to be open to all types of treatment at the same time.
I think it's essential, really. It's like there are so many different treatment options, and not every option is going to work for every person because
Right.
we're all so different and we have different life experiences and different things that work for us. It's like for some people, I could say like, hey, track your protein, make sure you're having 30 grams of protein with every meal, and that'll work for somebody and change their life. And for someone else, it could increase anxiety because all of a sudden they're needing to track their food.
Yeah.
So it's like the, yeah, I think that, and for some people, like herbs and mushrooms are going to be super effective. And for other people, it's like a good SSRI will just like change their whole life. And I think it's so important to not be too kind of strict about your beliefs about like what treatment should look like. It's
Yeah.
like going into like wanting to feel better, but saying like, I'm never going to change anything about nutrition, or I'm never going to exercise, or I'm never going to use a pharmaceutical. It's like being open to all of that to see what really works for you. I think, yeah, it's just so important.
What do you do to help your own mental health?
Yeah, I love to spend time outside. I love the forest. I love, yeah, just really nature does it for me. I also really enjoy working out and lifting weights, and eating a high protein diet is something that is, yeah, important for me. And with an 11-month-old trying to get enough sleep, I think it's like definitely in the last year, I've seen that have like the biggest day to day impact. It's like whether I've slept or not is like my emotional stability is totally dependent on how much sleep I've gotten. Definitely. And yeah, and I think really like having a good breakfast with plenty of protein has been essential for me throughout the postpartum period and life generally for my mental health.
What has it been like for you for having an infant?
Yeah, it has been like the greatest joy I've ever experienced, and also like the most fatigue I've ever experienced. It's like, um, yeah, definitely like the most tired and the most happy I've ever been. And I think that what's called like the fourth trimester, like the first 3 months after I gave birth, were challenging on so many levels. It's like the most transformative experience I've ever gone through. All of a sudden, you're caring for this new baby. It can feel really lonely at times. Your body is healing. I'm used to being a very active person, and so I was kind of stuck in bed for a while. It was so challenging on so many levels, but with all of that challenge, I had really great support with my husband and my family, and I got this like beautiful, healthy baby boy. So that kind of, yeah, it was like the silver lining and all of it.
I have two girls who are 10 and 6, and that first
Yeah.
year was always the most challenging one.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's just wild. It's like you're healing, you're sleep deprived, you're in charge of this other person's body.
Right.
And I mean, now that he's like crawling very fast, it's like this whole other level of challenge. And then for the women too, it's like our hormones are going through these like huge shifts, and hormones have such a huge impact on your mental health. It's like with every shift my body's gone through, I can feel like like a shift happening, and then my body acclimates to it and it improves over time. But yeah, I think that during that postpartum period, I think it can be really helpful for women to know that like all of their experiences are so normal. And if you go on Reddit, you'll see there's like a million other moms experiencing the exact same thing. Yeah.
That that actually brings me to a point of when you're working with people, working with your clients, how important is it for them to have a support system when they go home with this?
It's so important. And that's always like one of my first questions that I ask people. It's like, what is your support system like? And not everyone has a support system, and that can be like so challenging. And so, whether you're finding that support system through like a religious organization, through like church or synagogue, or even just like some walking group or something where you're with people, I think is so important because there is like a whole epidemic of loneliness. And it is very different to connect with somebody through a screen, through, Instagram or texting or whatever, than it is to connect with somebody in person in the flesh. And I think that that is so important for mental health, for us to like lift up our heads and be with people.
Where do you want to see your health mission in the next 3 to 5 years?
Um, well, I'd like for my patients to keep getting better.
Yes, that's a good one.
Yeah, I do feel excited about the prospect of psychedelic mushrooms being legalized. I think that that would be huge for mental health care. I think it'd be huge to be able to prescribe those in my practice. And I, yeah, I really hope that that is a shift that happens in the next 3 to 5 years. Um, yeah, and I hope that I'm just still practicing medicine the way that I am, and um, yeah, and I'm so curious to see. I think like each year there's always new research and different herbs and therapies and different things to try, and just keep educating myself on different ways to improve people's lives and health. Um, yeah, it feels very important to me.
How can people reach out to you and learn more?
Yeah, so I have a website, dranasitkoff.com, and I am a licensed naturopathic doctor in Washington. So if you live in Washington, I can be your doctor. I also have a lot of blogs on that website that don't really talk about mental health specifically, but talk a lot about mushrooms. I have
Yeah.
a lot of information about mushrooms if anybody is curious about how to use medicinal mushrooms for health generally. And then I do have a medicinal mushroom supplement company called Lucida Medicinals, and my website is lucidamedicinals.com. And that website also has a whole knowledge center if people want to learn more about mushrooms for brain health and nervous system health.